Circulatory system of earthworm. The circulatory or blood vascular system of an earthworm is a closed type. It consists of the blood vessel, heart, capillaries, and blood glands. Blood is composed of fluid plasma and colorless corpuscles. Blood is red in color due to the presence of respiratory pigment hemoglobin, erythrochroin, in it. Hemoglobin is not contained in the corpuscles like vertebrates, but occurs dissolved in plasma. Hemoglobin aids in the transportation of oxygen for respiration. Blood vessels. They are of two types, collecting blood vessels and distributing blood vessels. They are closed tubes with a definite wall, and they break into capillaries to ramify in the different parts of the body. The arrangement of blood vessels in the anterior 13 segments is different from that behind the 13th segments, i.e., in the region of the intestine. So, the blood vessels can be described under two heads: A. Blood vessels and their arrangements behind the 13th, i.e., intestinal region. B. Blood vessels and their arrangement in the anterior 13th segments. A. Blood vessels and their arrangements behind 13th, i.e. intestinal region. The blood vessels of this region include median longitudinal blood vessels, the intestinal blood plexus, the commissural vessel, the integumentary vessel, the nephridial vessel. 1. Median longitudinal blood vessels. A. Dorsal vessel. The largest blood vessel of the body. Runs mid-dorsally above the alimentary canal, from one end of the body to another. Thickest vessel with contractile muscular walls visible from outside as a dark line through the thin and semi-transparent body wall. Provided with pair of valves in the front of the septum in each segment. The direction of blood flow in this vessel is from backward to forward, from posterior to anterior. Contractile and pulsates rhythmically to force blood from posterior to anterior side. Behind the 13th segment, it is collecting vessels, receiving blood through two pairs of dorsointestinal vessels from the intestine, and a pair of commissural vessels from a subneural vessel in each segment. The commissural vessels from the loop behind each septum, and they receive blood from the body wall, nephridia, and prostate glands. The commissural vessels also give out blood in each segment through a septointestinal branch to the intestine. B. Ventral vessel. It is also a large vessel that runs mid-ventrally below the alimentary canal and above the nerve cord from the second segment to the last segment of the body. Its walls are thin and without muscles and valves. The direction of blood flow in this vessel remains from anterior to the posterior side or from in front to backward. It is a principally distributing vessel. It supplies blood, each segment, through a pair of ventrotegumentary vessels to integumentary nephridia, body wall, septa, and reproductive organs. This vessel also gives out a ventrointestinal vessel to lower parts of the intestine in each segment behind the 13th segment. Behind the 13th segment, each ventrotegumentary vessel sends a small branch, a septonephridial branch, supplying the septal nephridia. C. Subneural vessel. It is also a long and slender vessel that runs immediately beneath the nerve cord in the midventral position. It extends from the 14th segment to the last segment and is formed by the union of two lateral esophageal vessels. It is without muscular walls and internal valves. The direction of blood flow is from in front backward. It is mainly a collecting vessel. It receives blood from the ventral nerve cord and ventral wall in each segment through a pair of small branches. It gives a pair of commissural vessels in each segment that joins the dorsal vessel. 2. Intestinal blood plexus. The intestine is richly supplied with blood capillaries that form a close network. Consists of a close network of capillaries in the wall of the intestine. There are two capillaries networks in the intestine: I, external plexus, 2, internal plexus. External plexus lies on the surface of the gut and receives blood from the ventral vessel through ventrointestinal and septointestinal and passes it on to internal plexus. The internal plexus is present in between the circular muscle layer of the intestine and the internal epithelial lining. Internal plexus passes on blood, along with absorbing nutrients, to the dorsal vessel through dorsointestinal. 3. Commissural vessels. It connects the dorsal and submural vessels. They receive blood from nephridia, body wall, and the reproductive organs through capillaries and send them to the dorsal blood vessel. 4. Integumentary vessels. These vessels, coming from ventral vessels, supply blood to integument for aeration. The aerated blood is collected by numerous capillaries of the commissural vessels in each segment. Thus, there is a close parallelism between venous and arterial capillaries throughout the body wall. 5. Nephridial vessels. Originate from the ventrotegumentary vessels of the ventral vessel. They supply blood to nephridia. B. Blood vessels and their arrangement in anterior 13 segments. It consists of the following: median longitudinal vessels, Herat and anterior loops, blood vessels of the gut. The function of collecting blood from the anterior region of the gut is taken over by a new vessel supraesophageal, while the blood from the peripheral structures is collected by the right and left lateral esophageal. 1. Median longitudinal blood vessels. A. Dorsal vessel. The blood vessel becomes the distributing vessel in these segments instead of the collecting vessel. Structurally, it is like that of anterior segments, but it has neither dorsointestinal nor commissural vessels opening into it. It sends out all the collected blood from the posterior region of the body into the hearts and the anterior region of the gut. In the gut, it divides into 3 branches, distributes over the pharyngeal bulb and the roof of the buccal chamber. However, it supplies to the stomach, gizzard, esophagus, pharynx, and other related parts. B. Ventral vessel. The blood vessel remains to distribute in these segments also, but extends only up to the second segment. No ventrointestinal, hence it does not supply to the alimentary canal in this region. Ventral vessels give off a pair of ventrotegumentary vessels in each segment, supply blood to the body wall, septa, nephridia, and reproductive organs. See supraesophageal vessel. It is the shortest, thin-walled collecting vessel lying mid-dorsally above the stomach and confined to segments 9 to 13. Connected to the lateral esophageal vessel through 2 pairs of anterior loop. Connected to the ventral vessel through 2 pairs of lateroesophageal hearts. At places, it divides into separate vessels that reunite to form a single vessel. It collects blood from the stomach, gizzard, and, through anterior loops, from lateral esophageal, and pumps it through lateral esophageal hearts into the ventral vessel. D. Lateral esophageal. In fact, the submural vessels bifurcate in the 14th segments to form 2 lateral esophageal. These vessels are thick and lie one on the ventrolateral side of the gut, running from the anterior end of the body up to the 13th segment. Closely attached to the wall of the stomach from 10th to 13th segments and communicate with the ring vessels. These receive a pair of ventrotegumentary vessels in each segment, collecting blood from the body wall, septa, nephridia, and reproductive organs. Some of the blood passes to supraesophageal vessels through anterior loops in each of the segments 10 and 11 and through several ring vessels running through the wall of the stomach. The rest of the blood flows back into the submural vessels. They function like submural and commissural vessels of the posterior region. These are collecting vessels. 2. Hearts and anterior loop. In each segment 7, 9, 12, and 13 is found a pair of large, thick, muscular, and rhythmically contractile vertical vessels, called hearts. They are neurogenic, i.e., the heart originates in the nerve cells of the heart. They pump blood from dorsal to the ventral vessels, while flow in opposite direction is prevented by internal valves. The hearts of the 12th and 13th segments are joined above to both the dorsal and the esophageal vessels, called lateroesophageal hearts. These hearts have thick muscular walls and a pair of valves at each junction with dorsal vessels and supraesophageal vessel, and another pair of valves at the ventral end. These allow flowing blood downwards only. Another heart of 7th and 9th segments connect dorsal and ventral vessels only and are called lateral hearts. They have 4 pairs of valves that allow blood to flow only downwards. Besides 4 pairs of heart, there are 2 pairs of loop-like vessels called anterior loop. The anterior loop is a pair of thin-walled, non-pulsatile, non-muscular, and loop-like broad vessels, without valves, in each of the 10th and 11th segments. Anterior loop convey blood from lateral esophageal into the supraesophageal vessel. 3. Blood vessels of the gut. On another side of the stomach situated ring-like vessels. Ring vessels are characteristic circular vessels of the stomach situated within the muscular coat, about 12 vessels per segment. These vessels connect the supraesophageal and lateral esophageal vessels. Through these vessels, blood flows upwards from the lateral esophageal into the supraesophageal. The buccal cavity, pharynx, and gizzard receive their blood supply from dorsal blood vessels directly. Circulation of blood. Blood flows from behind to forward in the dorsal vessel, and from front to backward in ventral, lateroesophageal, supraesophageal, and subneural vessels. The ventral vessel is the main distributing vessel, supplying blood to all parts of the body. In the first 13 segments, it supplies blood to the body wall, septa, nephridia, and reproductive organs through ventrotegumentary. Behind the 13th segment, it supplies blood to the body wall and nephridia through ventrotegumentary. Supplies blood to gut wall through ventrointestinal. Subneural, lateral esophageal, and supraesophageal are the main collecting vessels. Lateral esophageal collects blood in the first 13 segments from the alimentary canal, body wall, nephridia, septa, and reproductive organs. And they discharge into supraesophageal through anterior loops and ring vessels. Supraesophageal also collects blood from the gizzard and stomach and pours into the ventral vessel through lateroesophageal hearts. Subneural collects blood in the intestinal region from the ventral body wall and nerve cord, and send into dorsal vessels through the commissural, which also receives blood from the body wall, septa, and nephridia. Commissural also pours some blood into the gut wall through septointestinal. Dorsal vessel functions both collecting and distributing vessels. It collects blood through dorsointestinal in the intestinal region from the gut wall, and through commissural from subneural vessel, septa, and nephridia. In the first 13 segments, it distributes some blood through branches to the alimentary canal and pours the remaining blood through hearts into the ventral vessel. The blood distributes digested food to various body regions. And it collects waste substances like nitrogenous waste and CO2, which are eliminated through nephridia, skin, and the coalomic fluid. Blood glands. In the segments 4, 5, and 6 segments above pharyngeal mass and connected with pharyngeal or salivary glands are found small, red-colored, follicular bodies, the blood glands. Each gland consists of a mass of loose cells surrounded by a capsule with a syncytial wall. These glands are connected with pharyngeal nephridia and with salivary glands. These glands manufacture blood corpuscles and hemoglobin. They are also regarded to be excretory by some workers.